All right, discharge superheat min and maximum. So, in terms of a centrifugal, most of the time on the low end, if you've got, say, a low load, or you've got, say, you're running a higher refrigerant level in your evaporator, which is going to drop your discharge superheat a bit, you'll typically see, say, 10 to 15 degrees on the low end, right? So, say you've got a lower load, or maybe you've got a little bit of a heavy charge, or if you're running your evaporator level a little high compared to maybe where it needs to be, and you've got some lower load conditions, then yeah, all you take those factors into account. 10 to 15 on the very, very low end. Personally, I really don't like them to go below 15, even though depending on the compressor, some of them will. And by discharge superheat, I'm calculating that based off of the discharge line temperature from the condenser saturation temperature. Okay, so I'm taking those two, subtracting them, getting my discharge superheat. On the upper end, usually around 25 to 30 degrees with a pretty good load, charge and everything is good, you could see that. Now, if I've got a lower load condition, but yet I'm running a 25, 30 degree discharge superheat, I'm going to start asking questions, because that's that whole dilemma you fall into is, yeah, just because these are the parameters, right? These are your, say, min and max. So if I had to put a hard number to it, okay, 15 min, 30 max. I'll circle back around on the max here in a second, but there's just some hard numbers. Now, that is relative to the load on the machine. So it's a much more dynamic set of numbers. We have a lower load, but we're seeing those higher end numbers. That indicates that something may not be okay. We could be low on charge, or we may be underfeeding the evaporator, whether that be a metering device issue, a set point issue, depending on the style of chiller we have. So, or there could be a mechanical issue going on in the compressor itself, where something just ain't jiving right in there, and it's causing a lot of additional heat and friction. So these are some things to consider into what could elevate that discharge superheat, but yet you still have a low load condition. Lower load conditions means our compressor should be unloaded, and the discharge superheat should reflect that with a little bit of a lower discharge superheat. And then as we load up, we should see that superheat go up. Now, there are some machines that, even with a pretty substantial load, they may still run 15 to 20 degrees of discharge superheat, depending on how well they're tuned. And you won't see a whole lot of shift in that superheat from low load to high load. That just comes back to that machine, how well it was installed, how well it's configured, and just its operating conditions at the time. So if everything's jiving, like that, just because you've got a full load but you're running a lower discharge superheat, say 15 for example, doesn't mean you've got a problem. Okay, but it would definitely tell me that if I'm on the low end of the load but I'm still having a high discharge superheat, that would make me want to ask questions. I hope that makes sense. This is where we have to apply our human logic and our understanding and experience of these things, because the circumstances are very dynamic in what could or couldn't be. Okay, but that's why you are paid to be in the role that you're in, and that's why we're doing a conversation like this, to help kind of build on these things and get you a better foundation. Now, the dangerous parts of it. So the 30 degrees, there are some situations, especially at really high peak loads, you might see more than 30. For a lot of compressors, it's probably not going to be that big a deal, especially if you have that high load. So just because you've got over 30 doesn't necessarily mean freak out. Or start trying to dive in and chase ghosts that aren't really there. Like that's the big thing that gets a lot of us. We start chasing ghosts, trying to see what's going on. In reality, everything's fine. It's just in a specific circumstance, right? So now if I'm below 10, something's wrong. Something is wrong as far as I'm concerned. And I'm going to start looking at where that liquid level is first and foremost in that evaporator. And whether it be an overcharge, whether it be, say, overfeeding, we could have a metering device issue. There's a few things, but when you start getting below that and the closer you get to 5 and less, especially, that's when you start getting into that liquid droplet territory. And that's when you start shredding impellers, because then that refrigerant level can get so high. We're only running a half a degree to 1 or 2 degrees of suction superheat to begin with. And these compressors cannot do liquid, period. Okay. So a droplet of liquid is a rock thrown into that impeller, and it will ding it, it will mark it up, and it will just completely destroy that aluminum, especially these high speed machines that are running, 20 to 40,000 RPM. Not going to work. So that is a condition that we really, really have to be mindful of. And I'd much rather run high discharge superheat than run a low one any day of the week. If you're not already in Chiller Academy, I'd really encourage you to go check it out. Just think about it, right? This is what I do full time. I've committed. I've stepped out of the field, committed my career to this going forward. This is what I've always wanted to do, and to be able to educate, help others, and grow, and help this industry take steps forward. So chilleracademy.com. Like I'd love to be able to work with you over there. We've got a community page. All the lessons have a comment section. That's what I spend a lot of my day doing. If I'm not working on the lesson material itself, then I am in the comments and I'm trying to respond to those as fast as I can, in addition to helping you through email and otherwise. So love to be able to work with you. For all of those that are in the academy, y'all are doing some great work out there. Keep it up. I really appreciate the support and the feedback that you've given.